At any point in this conversation, if you find value in it, please subscribe. It is hugely beneficial, and it tells Google and everyone out there that this is content worth watching. Thank you for everyone thus far who has commented, liked, subscribed, and told their friends.
Welcome everybody to Learn Full. Today we're joined with Olivia and Alex, who I believe have some type of marital connection. I'm not entirely. I'm just kidding. You guys are married. If you guys could introduce yourselves, we'll kind of take from there with people who don't know you.
Okay, so my name is Olivia Lesslar. I'm a medical doctor. I'm educated, registered, trained in Australia, but I've been a digital nomad actually for the last 2 years or so. Spend most of my time in Europe and in the US, but I go back to Australia maybe about 2 to 3 months a year. I hold different roles with different companies and different clinics around the world. But my focus in what I do is, generally speaking, psychoneuroimmunology, neuroscience, and I look at everything through an evolutionary lens. My preference is for complex chronic conditions, mystery illnesses, emerging syndromes, which includes long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome, Alzheimer's, cancer, so on and so forth. Alex, my partner, no, we are not married, not yet, though, but...
Okay, my bad.
We will be having a discussion after this.
No pressure.
And I'll let Alex introduce himself.
I'm Alex Layendecker. I'm a PhD in human sexuality with emphasis in the space life sciences, so focus for sex and reproduction in outer space. I'm the founder and director of the Advanced Space Life Research Institute, which is a Cape Canaveral, Florida-based 501c3, which focuses on specifically that type of research and has been constructing the experiment mission roadmap for that for roughly the last 2 years. Background is professionally is actually with the military. Started off in space launch and later went into pilot training, become a helicopter pilot for combat search and rescue. But I've been a digital nomad for roughly the last 6 months as well, and am sort of in the middle of a transition out of the military fully into the space life sciences. So that's a little bit of me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So his intro, his bio is a little bit cooler. Can I do mine again?
Hey, I think both of yours are pretty interesting, and the links will be in the show notes after the show. But I guess there's that question, like, have people had sex in space?
Yeah, always the first. Always the first one. So there has been a lot of hearsay around whether that has actually occurred. You know, there's I've heard plenty of accounts of folks talking about mission control engineers who said that they heard about some flight doctor saying that heart rates had spiked above a certain level that might be corresponding to sexual activity and things of that nature. But I've always considered all of that stuff hearsay. There have been, I guess you could say, combinations or opportunities for sex to happen in space, the most prominent of which has been an American astronaut couple that went up in the early 90s. I think the mission was ST-47, if I'm recalling it correctly, on the space shuttle. And, they were up there for longer than a week with a total crew of 7. But, there's a lot of just speculation that gets thrown around. You have to remember that NASA astronauts, if you remember their mentality, is one of a very high level of professionalism, and the fact that they are constantly monitored by the medical folks on the ground. So you always have
the sensors,
sensors and whatnot that are attached to you for a large part of those missions. And then you've had the history of the International Space Station, which has been up there for decades now. All sorts of different combinations of people that have been there at the same time. And, the ISS is a very large orbital research facility. But my focus has always been on, what do we actually know, and kind of focusing on the problems. The issues that I tend to focus on are not so much whether somebody has had sex in space thus far, because you can dig and dig and dig, and you're probably never going to get a really concrete answer, or not one that you're really going to be able to verify and prove.
It's a hard problem.
Yeah, or you can So, and the puns, yeah. I mean, the comedic material writes itself. There's a lot of great, the Big Bang and other things that you could say. I don't know how you would title it, but
But
yeah,
your focus is
focus has always been on what the really what the upcoming research problems are going to be.
Well,
So I know I gave you a very long non-answer answer.
Yes.
But
Well, I think that is like the
animals,
closest you'll get.
animals have had sex in space. So animals have mated, rats and mice have mated, cockroaches, weirdly enough. That was a weird experiment. I don't like to talk about that one so much, but fish and a few other members of the animal kingdom.
Yeah. Does it do anything? Like, are people able to fully form when they're born in space? I mean, it's a function of sex. You make babies. So, like, do the babies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nearest term in, or excuse me, the closest in what I would honestly refer to right now as health threat, is the threats to safe and successful, what we would term safe and successful reproduction in outer space environments. Microgravity and radiation, and especially more their combined synergistic effects, tend to have really negative impacts on human physiology in general. So you have fully grown and matured, sort of peak physical condition adult astronauts that go into space, and they have 20% bone mass loss. They have weakening of the heart. They have degradation of the eyes, and a whole litany of other issues that we can discuss here. If you consider rates of cell division in a fully, in a fetus that is developing, the compounding of those effects over time are probably going to be catastrophic. So reproduction and safe and successful reproduction, the conditions that we need are going to be something that we need to figure out going into the future before we really start allowing humans to try to reproduce in space.
Is this one of those? It seems like something that could be overlapping, like effects with the brain, Olivia's work, psychoneuroimmunology, and that type of stuff, and yours. But at the same time, that could just be me trying to bridge our two things, so I can involve Olivia with the question. But like, is there an overlap there in terms of like
we
how
both were green to make this?
Yeah, no, I don't understand why the transition isn't happening. So I do actually. When we originally met, one of the things that really triggered off the conversation is because there is so much, I think, overlap in the space life sciences and I guess what you could call the longevity and anti-aging sciences. A lot of the same factors come into play. For example, we know that astronauts age quite faster when they are up in space. Their cells are aging at a faster rate than our cells are aging here on Earth. When you consider the averages. So a lot of the same, I guess, sort of solutions that will apply in the longevity and anti-aging community are going to help us figure out issues that we see in the space life sciences as well, I believe, going forward. That's just kind of a 1,000-foot view of it. But yeah.
And as well, I mean, if you're talking about longevity is just another new buzzword for healthy, increased lifespan or health span. And these are about understanding what factors go into optimizing human health, which will then help people live longer. So ignore the longer part. We're talking about health span factors. And if we know health span factors, because, let's just use the 12 hallmarks of aging, those include things that are going to be absolutely affected with microgravity, off-world environments and that kind of thing. So when we wound up chatting in we met at the end of November, but one of the reasons why I came on board with Azri, so that's the Advanced Space Life Research Institute, is because a lot of these issues that are going to be plaguing, astronauts or astrotourists is actually the stuff that's plaguing us here on Earth. Fertility rates have dropped. There is an issue with mitochondria here on Earth. We have more chronic disease now than ever before. And it's so, there are obviously some people who think, well, the earth isn't doing so well. People on earth aren't doing so well. Let's go try and find another place to call home. And that's fair and good. I mean, whatever, we're going to get a lot of science out of that. But those issues that people face in space, they're mirrored here on earth. Absolutely. And we have all the ingredients for life because we evolved with it. So we can't get stuff right on earth. I don't know how on earth we're going to get stuff right in space.
We're gonna have to come up with it. Yes.
Yeah, I read that it might be microplastics. Like, so it's a compounding thing that's affecting fertility. But do you have like, what are your thoughts on what's causing the fertility decline?
Yeah, should we do it like alphabetically or chronologically, or look?
What are like the top ones for you? Yeah.
So we have had a bombardment to the human body of exogenous non-native chemicals for decades. Some of them have been unmitigated going into our body. There are some really basic things which everyone accepts to be normal, regular, but which from a evolutionary perspective is sort of out of step. So fluoride, for example, in our water. Now, has fluoride played a role in decreasing cavities and so on and so forth? Yes, it has. But when you use fluoride as a band-aid, you're not actually addressing why people were getting teeth and gum issues, degradation in the first place. Because if you go into any natural history museum and you look at a skull from 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago or more, they didn't have rotting teeth, and they weren't able to use mercury amalgams to plug those holes. They weren't doing root canals, and they have, if you look at those skulls, perfect dental arches. So there's plenty of research, mostly in medical anthropology. There's a very famous book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, where he talks about the fact that he went around the world. He was a dentist. He is actually the first president of what is now known as the American Dental Association. And he went around the world trying to figure out the fact that, why is it that so many of his patients had, terrible rotting teeth. And he found that in civilizations which were still eating a non-highly processed, ultra-processed diet, who were eating their indigenous foods, they had perfect dental arches. They didn't need to have their wisdom teeth pulled. But the minute there was a port built and food, ultra-processed food came to that area, mostly sugar and, refined grains and all the rest of it. So it's not just the food itself, but also that you didn't have to chew as much. Then you have this blast radius of issues. And by the third generation, their teeth were like broken piano keys. So fluoride in the water is one example of a quick fix. Great. We never addressed the root cause of some of these issues, but did we evolutionarily come through over the last few thousand years with fluoride? We didn't. Controversial, but there are definitely pockets of science saying, hey, it's neither right nor wrong. It's let's ask questions and do more research. You cannot do research on certain questions 50, 70 years ago with the assays that we had then and call that book closed. It doesn't work like that. Science just keeps evolving. And that's just one thing, right? Microplastics are the other. The amount of chemicals that someone is exposed to with their laundry detergents and cleaning detergents and personal hygiene stuff, a little bit, no problem. Another little bit, no problem. But it's a compounding effect. They even say that indoor pollution is worse than outdoor pollution. You add to that stress, you add to that, petrochemicals and the shit food that we have and the excess of fertilizers and herbicides and, glyphosate and how that affects the shikimate pathway of gut bacteria. You don't even know when to start or where to stop. And because there are so many factors, you will never be able to formulate an appropriate randomized controlled trial that's going to be acceptable to the powers that be to make real changes.
Yeah. It seems like a lot. I mean, there was the guy that first got led out of, catalytic converters and started raising people's awareness on this. That was just one guy who was on a crusade, and that's taken a long time to get, headway on. And now we're recently discovering that there's like lead in female products, like all these metals and stuff. If you're
Right.
starting to study female products, and it's like it's a little surprising that that to this day that there aren't structures in place to make sure that things are of a quality that they aren't affecting people.
So it's the system is the system, right? And we generally speaking have to start with trying to find holes in the system and try and plug those holes. One of the things in Australia, so I'm not very familiar with American regulations and laws, but in Australia, for example, a lot of the issues that are raised and then the government is forced to do something about it, blah, blah. A lot of the agencies work on like a complaints driven mechanism, which is the first problem. Reporting, there tends to be reporting biases. So, for example, the recent COVID, right? How doctors or patients reported side effects from the vaccines, for example, or how people were reporting, doctors were reporting in hospital what a patient died from. Like if you died with COVID-19 went on this certificate, death certificate. So there are just lots of little bits and pieces which hinder us. Again, there's no right or wrong way. I mean, if there was a right way to do it, we do it the right way. It's just we have to have the resources and the will to try and change the system for better. And I think that that's where we're sort of slowing down. There's just not enough resources.
Yeah, there's I think it's Succession, the TV show. Have you guys watched this?
Oh God, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
When Kendall does not yet. Yeah, it will. That the writers have a very interesting take on human psychology, but anyway, so the Kendall Roy guy goes up there and he spins this like living plus communities or something like that, where it's just a community of people that are all kind of like getting the best medicine, the best everything. And it almost feels like what we would need to create, like you go like state by state and slowly kind of like convert people to like these better practices. Because like the world's really big and it's really complicated, and a lot of people are they don't know how to help. They kind of like stuck in their ways in a lot of ways, and they're scared of science, and most people aren't really willing to accept, like, say I don't know. Is probably like, I think most people when they say like, oh, if you meet someone who says I don't know, there's like, oh, that's kind of neat, it's noteworthy to admit that you don't know something. Like that's very low bar for a lot of people. But I'm not saying Kendall Roy was right in these living plus communities, but it does seem like that exists online with the lifespan, sends all these little different like groups of people working together. It's like a little community where there's some people doing stuff, and then you have Brian Johnson kicking up, that's doing all these like fun challenges, and he's having fun with it. And I think in one of my recent interviews, they suggested he could get I think he could have his like testicles removed or something if he really wanted to optimize for his longevity. Apparently, like removing testosterone like improves longevity outcomes. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna send that to Brian. I don't think he's gonna do it. But he has had kids, so he's helping with the fertility issue a little bit, and so is Elon Musk a little.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Seems like he's made that his personal crusades.
Yeah.
What to do with this information about removing of testicles, Lowell? I mean,
I thought it was wild too. I thought he was joking. I was like, okay, this, when a scientist is like being really serious and they say something that sounds outlandish. I don't know. I thought he was joking. But yeah, like if you were to remove, it would actually have a positive effect, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
I met that guy. He's a nice guy. He's out in Chicago. He invited me to the conference. Real nice guy. And people can check out his interview. It's very detailed.
Well, you got to give us somewhere to go with these things, man. So testicle removal. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Well,
we're literally that bear meme.
I mean, if you'd have to have balls to actually go down that road. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
So this, I have a lot of, the Kendall Roy thing where you're talking about these villages or populations where you implement the right stuff. What I get quite nervous about is who decides what's right Who decides what's best for everybody? Who decides what goes in or out of protocols? And that's why choice is super important, because and a wider education for all doctors, and also the patients alike, is really important, because yes, there is no one diet to rule them all. Personally, I'm a diet agnostic now. I used to be all gung-ho about low carb, and then it was keto, and then it was a carnivore diet, which and a vegan or vegetarian. Like, I've done all the different iterations, and I've literally come out the other end gone, and there is no perfect diet that should be used for everybody, unless, of course, you're talking specifically about certain things. It doesn't matter if you're keto or carnivore or low carb. A lot of these different diets still advocate for, low ultra processed foods. And that, I think, everyone can get behind. So, but, as you can see, there's not very much consensus about even something as simple as diet,
Yeah.
So who gets to decide what goes into this particular village of longevity or whatever,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like whoever has the best marketing. So Brian Johnson's winning on that one.
Exactly. Don't get me started, Lowell. This is it, right? Alex is kind of used to my high horsing, so.
No, I think you're right, as always. So
Yeah.
I
I get the marriage conversation that's coming later. We do have a writing question. Oh no, you were gonna say something. We had a writing question, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna start ranting, but
I like
I can
ranting.
rant anytime.
Yeah, I like ranting. But no. So I thought this was a good one. How does psychology affect neural inflammation? How big is the effect size on such an intervention on interventions?
Okay,
Yeah.
so sorry, do you have something?
no, go ahead.
So it absolutely does have an effect. Full stop, end of story. In fact, neural inflammation is literally just brain inflammation, right? And brain inflammation has now been shown to be a factor in most all different brain pathologies. Whether you're looking at neuro-onc, so cancers, neurodegen, so that's your dementias, your Alzheimer's, your Parkinson's, or neuropsych, and that's going to be your depressions and anxieties and OCDs. The very fact that we even split the two, neurology and psychiatry, is bizarre, but we are now definitely going back. So neuropsych is the new way to be treating psychiatric patients, mental health patients, blah, 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 because inflammation, brain inflammation, is absolutely a factor in this. How does psychology play into neuroinflammation? Generally speaking, for every thought that you have that originates here, okay, you're going to be thinking that thought in a way that is a particular frequency. That's one thing. So how the ion channels open, close, how the fluidity of the cell membranes are, go, the rafts that are within that cell membrane, that all changes. But the simple relay is that how you think affects how your body reacts. How your body reacts by the vagus nerve is a big one that everyone knows about, right? When your mind is afraid, you actually physiologically increase in inflammatory markers. Why? Because you send a signal via the vagus nerve to your gut. You open tight junctions. Your gut microbiome sees things that it shouldn't, turns on inflammation, sends another message up to your glia, your microglia, and you turn on inflammation in your brain. It's all defense mechanisms, all hardwired evolutionary defense mechanisms. The paper I would recommend for that is by Charles Raison, 2016, The Inflammatory Bias of Depression. I'm pretty sure it is. Talking about psychology, emotions, how it increases inflammation, how specifically it actually increases inflammation in the brain, leading to sickness-like behaviors, also known as depression.
Bridging the gap a little bit to Alex's domain as well, but there was this guy named John Glenn who would, I believe, would sometimes almost fall asleep on the rockets as they would go up into space, and people would ask him why is he so chill when there's a bomb going off on his butt, and he said that it's why worry about it and have to get punished twice, and so if you have So if you have these situations where I think everyone, I've met a lot of people that have like, anxiety, all these different things. If you have a very chaotic mind and you are having like this relationship between your thoughts and it's how it's affecting your whole body, how can people go from that state to like healthier? Like, is it meditation or what? What would you kind of think about that without it being recommendations or advice? Because we're not giving advice. We're not being held liable today. But yeah, like how would you think about like how to get someone to I don't know if like John Glenn is a weird guy or like if that's like everyone could become like John Glenn, but he's the only person I know that's like John Glenn.
Well, I mean, one thing I would say about John Glenn is the fact that obviously he's part of that first class of astronauts, the Mercury 7. So he was a test pilot, elite test pilot, picked from the best of America's ranks, and obviously a superhuman performer. So there is an entirely different psychology and mentality there. The same type that you're going to see in Olympic athletes, and what we see in astronauts today. So I don't know John Glenn's mechanisms. I have had the kind of distinct privilege of getting to work with very elite pilots in my past. And it is, I mean, there is a lot of training that goes into getting people to a certain level. And that is really sort of in, I would say, any aspect of superhuman performance. Natural talent can only take you so far. So nobody wakes up and is going to be an Olympic level athlete, because an Olympic level athlete is going to perform, seconds or even microseconds, thousandths of a second faster than the person who's going to make second or third place, or just your average athlete. And as far as test pilots go, I mean, that's an extremely competitive sort of selection process, and we pull those folks from the most elite ranks of our pilot groups for the United States, and it's similar around the world. So there is an entirely different level of mentality and training just to be able to get to those upper tiers, the level of focus that those folks have. The mechanisms that they use outside of training, which Olivia can probably speak a lot better to, are going to be those things like centering and meditation, understanding the chemistry of how the brain is working in those scenarios.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go.
Well,
We both looked at you.
right. Look, it's a little bit like a diet, right? What works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other person. So I encourage all my patients to experiment. There are literally 1,001 different modalities that you can use to center yourself. But I think anyway that the first thing that needs to happen is that people even realize and know that they can control their thoughts, steal their mind, that they can control their physiology to some extent, right? With these sorts of practices. So the very best, let's call it the Dalai Lama or whoever it is able to change his physiology, i.e. increase anti-inflammatory molecules, decrease pro-inflammatory molecules, just by closing his eyes and putting himself into theta state. That has been demonstrated in the literature over and over again. Tumor necrosis factor, IL-6, IL-10, like these molecules have been demonstrated in blood samples with meditators, right? For the average person, and that's, I suppose, Alex deals with extraordinary people. That's why he's dating me. But I tend to deal with the sick people, right? I'm here on the ground, I'm here on earth, and I am more interested in the patients in front of me who are unwell and who are on the journey to getting better, who want to get better, who are there to see me and my colleagues because they think, they know, they feel, they have been told that it's possible to, with whatever complex chronic condition, mystery illness, emerging syndrome, or death sentence they've been given, that it's possible to change something, right? To make quality of life better. And dare I say it, these people are probably the real heroes because they're the ones who are also dealing with trials and tribulations of traumatic histories, of having to the prospect of leaving children, right, dying early, of not recognizing their bodies anymore because of whatever, not being able to socialize, not being able to do the things that we as humans are hardwired to want to do, to interact with other people, to enjoy food, to have connection with earth. Oh, sorry, I mean earth as in soil, like ground. And yes, meditation is very helpful. The sauna therapies are helpful, cryotherapy, and so on and so forth. But the which combination sings to you is what you have to discover for yourself. Like I enjoy to some extent a cold plunge after sauna, but I can't do cold as much as Alex can, and I certainly can't do hot as much as he can, and I'm not beating myself up over it. So I can now handle organ meats where I couldn't handle that 2 or 3 years ago because I retrained my palate. That's a choice I made for myself. So I think that telling people, as a doctor, telling people what they should or shouldn't do, I definitely used to, I have protocols and you should be doing this and when you should be doing it. And now I'm a lot more, I give patients a lot more bandwidth, because society in general already tells us, generally speaking, that we're not good enough. And I don't want to be kind of part of that, patients, generally speaking, are trying their best already. So
Yeah. What would it mean? So this is like something we could address. I think Olivia's the one who can give us the why, like why is this the way it is. But Alex, I also can like really enjoy Asana, but I can sit in them forever. I can turn it as hot as it is, and I'll sit in there and read a book. And people are like, "Well, you should get out of here. You're gonna have a stroke." And I just feel fine. And I don't know what it is. I like like a month ago, I sat in Asana the whole day, and people kept saying, "You're gonna have a stroke if you stay in here." It's like I don't know. It feels really good. So like, but I feel like I recently read of a case where a person they did a scan of their brain, and the inside of their skull, like there was like the brain was on the outside, but on the inside was cerebral spinal fluid, and essentially like over the course of their life, the cerebral spinal fluid slowly started like eating up their brain for some reason, like it was being denied of oxygen or something, and so like they had like 70 or 80% of their brain, 70-80% of their brain was just like fluid, and they never knew it, and they had a nice life. And so I don't know. I wonder, am I like slowly stroking out and I just don't know it? Like this individual who unfortunately had a lot of their brain eaten. Yeah. So what's the why behind that?
I mean, well, first off, if you want to maybe go get an MRI or something,
I had an MRI.
okay,
I had an MRI like 6 months ago.
Certainly not from the space life scientist.
not from me, but so, I mean,
Look, I think this actually goes back to, first of all, how do we perceive heat? So everybody is built slightly differently within particular parameters. And one of the ways that an evolutionarily conserved way that we perceive heat is actually through an ion channel called transit receptor potential vanilloid. So TRPV. There are various TRPVs, again, like I said, evolutionarily conserved. When they are activated, your body perceives whatever it is that has activated that particular ion channel, and then it will react in a way that it has been either born, it's a reflex to react in a particular way, or it's going to react in a way that it has been conditioned to. So a lot of these things can be changed, which is why if I went to try to climb to base camp of Everest, I would probably die, right? Especially if I did it in shorts. But Wim Hof has been able to do stuff like that because he has retrained how his brain perceives the incoming messages that are being that are activating his TRPMs, which is the one that's going to perceive cold. So as far as heat goes, there are some people who are able to recondition their body and change how much heat and exposure to that heat they're able to withstand. So back when I was in my when I was young, I used to be very sick. So I had really bad asthma up until I was in my I think it was early 30s or so. So because I had such bad asthma, I couldn't go into saunas because it made me feel claustrophobic, and I felt I couldn't breathe, and I wouldn't not have panic attacks, but I wouldn't be far off. Since I've been well with asthma and all those other issues, I have then started retraining my body to be able to withstand saunas, because I know that they provide a lot of benefits, right? No less heat shock proteins and NRF2 pathway and all these other things that people know. It's I knew there was a benefit, and so I wanted to retrain my body, and I did. And when it comes to a particular heat, I tap out. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I wonder, of course, like if I then put my mind to it and did it, I probably could. And that's because the thresholds for these transient receptor potential ion channels can be changed to a certain extent. And one of them is TRPVs for heat. And some people are born with a lower threshold, some people are born with a higher threshold, but you can change that.
I think what helps me is a book. Because if you're just sitting there, it gets kind of boring after a while. So if you bring a book, maybe that'll help you get over the bridge or that threshold that you're stuck at. But the book will be ruined though. Like don't the book will not survive.
Yeah, I was going to say the pages probably stick together.
But if you go to the bookstore, there are some books that you can buy that are made for bath time. I mean, it's really simple. Like, this is a duck, this is a cat, but you're probably gonna have to read
that. I think I know those ones. I know what a cat is. You don't eat them. But I have been recently I've been really reading a lot about the Sacklers. I don't know if you're familiar with them. The people who made like the Sacklers, the people who made the opioid epidemic in America.
Oh yes.
Yeah, they're giant pieces of shit. If they're listening, I hope they get hit by a truck. But anyway, I've been wondering, because there's this whole region of yeah, they suck. They're like probably the worst human beings. Like they I don't know. But anyway, when it comes to like chemicals affecting your body, there's nothing quite like addiction. And I have been recently reading about like Ibogaine and all these other things that are coming out to help people with their brains and kind of like reset them. But then I've also been reading that like heroin and some of these like harder stuff, it takes a really, really long time potentially for your brain to like rewire. I'm just curious, like your thoughts on like how I'm just always wondering, how can we help the victims of the Sacklers, get back on their feet and be healthy again?
This is going to be all her.
Look, at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head about neuroplasticity, because everything is connected to everything, and there is psycho, neuro, endo, immunology, right? So everything affects everything. You're able to induce neuroplasticity via several mechanisms. One of them is going to be psilocybin assisted therapy, for example, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. Like, there are lots of different ways to induce neuroplasticity, and you don't have to, look, for complex problems, sometimes you need complex modalities. So, but even just learning how to juggle is an act of forcing neuroplasticity, right? Asking your brain, willing your brain, creating a circumstance where your brain has to change, has to mold to what it's doing. Anyway, so there are lots of different modalities to shortcut to neuroplasticity. I haven't actually had any experience as a doctor, as a practitioner, with psychedelic assisted therapies, although I am 100% behind them from what I have seen. However, I do work with a clinic that does we do what's called a theta burst stimulation. So it's based off the same protocol, which is from Stanford, of transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a shortcut to neuroplasticity. So we will apply the magnetic device. It's like a 6-minute protocol or something like that. You have about 40 minutes of neuroplasticity, and then within that window you do whatever rehab, or you do some other neuroplastic adjunct that's going to sort of cement whatever it is that you're trying to do. So so red light therapy, photobiomodulation, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, whatever, visualization, meditation, breath work. And then we do it again and again and again. So you do TBS, so the theta bursts, like 5-6 times in a day. The patients are with us for quite a bit. addiction has been one of the things that we are trying to target, and by all accounts, there is some success with that. But there is, again, this is partly experimentation as well. We know that TMS works to induce neuroplasticity. What else is necessary? Because nobody falls into the void, the hole of addiction without some sort of other drivers in place, which is why I'm probably I don't know, I'm sure there are a few of us, but I'm not a doctor to tell someone who comes in who smokes to stop smoking, because that's not the problem. It's a problem, but it's not. Why is this patient smoking in the first place, right? And until you fill the void that they're using cigarettes for, you're not going to get anywhere. So with patients who were in pain, real pain, and they were using opioids, for example, for that pain, yes, there's been a change to some of the neural architecture. There's a change to some of the receptors in the brain. Those can be reset. No, I want to say reset, but you can massage it in a particular way with neuroplastic adjuncts. But there is something about, first of all, the pain that they were in, that they took those medications, and because, sorry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Not everybody who took opioids wound up with an addiction. There were other factors at play. And to acknowledge that there are so many complex pieces to a puzzle in a patient's life is to acknowledge that they are a whole person and that they deserve to be supported in lots of different avenues of their life to try and get them back on track. It's not just you took opioids, you're now an addict, therefore we're going to do something, one other thing, and then that's going to take you off the addiction train. Like, it's so much more complex than that,
It sounds like you're actually working on it, which is the good part. I think related to, addiction, when I think of it, is like, brain damage and TBIs. And I've always wondered, like, how quickly with like the best medicine can someone go from like TBI event to like fully healed. And I know someone who works on like the trauma part of the hospital that deals with like just TBIs, which can it's a very like sad floor to be on, because sometimes it's not great. I don't know if that relates to space at all, but I'm happy to have Alex's opinion on this as well.
So
he's trying to get you.
oh yeah.
No, it's all right.
I love how it's like, let's talk about traumatic brain injuries. Alex, sounds like
Alex, your degree is kind of coming here right now.
You've been in the military.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you haven't burnt any jet fuel. What is it, jet fuel? That if you burn it, it's not good for you.
Like outside in like a campfire kind of.
Well, apparently, like John Stewart was working on it or something, where like in the military they would burn like septic stuff with
burn.
Yeah, and it was really bad for them.
Apparently, I had some burn pit exposure in Afghanistan.
He doesn't remember.
So it's kind of hard to find something.
Yeah, how can we help Alex?
What are we talking about?
Yeah, how can we help Alex?
Yeah, thankfully, I think most of the burn pit stuff, it's started to already be uncovered and halted. But I think I did have a little bit when I was over there. Jet fuel. So my understanding of it is jet fuel actually doesn't like, you could apparently hold an open flame to it. This is how it's been explained to me. You could hold an open flame to the type of jet fuel that we use, and it won't light. So it's generally pretty safe. And it has to be ionized to be able to be burned. So yeah, no worries of campfire jet fuel stuff.
Have you seen in like the vet department where doctors dealing with traumatic brain injuries and concussions and stuff?
Everything that I know of TBIs is just stuff that I've heard of. So I had the honor of being part of a combat rescue squadron these last few years, and a lot of the folks that I worked with, they've seen a lot of TBIs in the back of the helicopter, because when an IED goes off, in Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever we happen to be, they are the the guys that fly in to get them and get them to a hospital, hopefully within the golden hour, as we call it. So yeah, a lot of kind of proximity exposure to discussion on TBIs, but yeah, my
Is there a protocol that the military use for like a set protocol? Like if you get a TBI in war or on the battlefield, that you know what you know what you're in for the next 6 months with the government rehab or whatever.
So yeah, there are protocols. I'm not terribly familiar with them on the medical side, but the government does have protocols for how they deal with TBIs and the type of follow-on care that people receive, and that includes with the VA after people get out. Because I know that TBIs contributed significantly to suicide rates that were happening in the military. Is something that I'd heard. So.
I like all of Olivia's questions, by the way.
Anyway.
This is great.
Looks like we've hit another testicle.
We've hit another testicle. Well, we only have two. So,
Yes.
Precisely here, well, I think it sounds like what you're doing. Well, I'm just saying, like I imagine that type of flying to come in and help people. If I was like kind of amalgamating, like bringing together like a job that'd be really fulfilling for me. Like that's something that sounds really fulfilling. Like the idea that you're coming in and helping people in such a meaningful way.
Yeah, there was definitely a reason that I wanted to be a part of that community. Is because there's the nobility, I guess, of the mission, and that you're getting to help save lives and try and make the worst day of somebody's life not be their last, but also just help however you can. And probably the best human beings I've ever known in my life are members of that community. And I would be hard pressed to find folks that are better. So I was very, very lucky to get to work with some of the people that I did. Yeah, and I will miss them dearly.
Have you thought about doing, I don't know what it's called and where you guys are, which I'm not doxing for the internet, it's like rescue helicopters, like basically for like a hospital or something, or they're usually independent, kind of like
like life flight and medevac.
Yeah. Have you thought of something like that?
Yeah, that's the effectively civilian component of kind of what my unit back home sort of does. So they're combat search and rescue, so they are able to sort of fight their way in, fight their way out, and their original mission set was rescuing downed pilots behind enemy lines. So that community was sort of born during Vietnam, and it's where they derive their name from, and sort of all the lore is built out of the conflict in Vietnam. So
what do you mean by that's where their name comes from?
I apologize. I should give some context to that. So the combat rescue community in the U.S. Air Force refers to themselves as Jolly Greens. That actually came, and I only learned this, I want to say probably a year ago, after I'd already been in the community for years at that point. The grass in Vietnam and helicopter landing zones tend to be very tall, and so you would have these two huge H-3 helicopters that would come and land in the field and create great big indents in the grass, and then they would take off again after they had evacuated everybody that they needed to. And flying back over, people would say, apparently somebody at some point said, "Oh, it looks like the Jolly Green Giant came walking by." So the symbol of the Air Force Combat Rescue community since then has been the Jolly Green Giant, same guy that you see on the can of beans. So yeah, they're a very, very special community, and again, I'm grateful to have been a part of them.
But from Olivia's perspective, is there anything that we can do to help out with TBI events? If we're looking at just the golden hour of we could use Comet or anything like that, like a car accident on the side of the road, that we could do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not medical advice,
Yes.
right? But we do know that if you're able to cool the brain just that little bit, that really helps, because one of the things that occurs during a TBI is that your brain is obviously trying to protect you. And one of the number one way for your body physiologically, it doesn't matter if it's your brain or your arm or your ankle, it's to turn on inflammation. So inflammation goes crazy. Now, but what is inflammation, right? All the different molecules involved in pro-inflammatory cascades and pathways are all released from their different holding sites. So, for example, a mast cell, which is it's a type of immune cell, it degranulates, and you got IL-6, human necrosis alpha, you've got histamine. Why? It's because a lot of these things have got to do with trying to bring in more soldiers to the area to help. That means vasodilation. That means increased temperature, increased lymphatic flow. Like there are lots of different things that your body's going to try and do to get help quick and bring resources, which includes the nutrients, red blood cells, so on and so forth. Okay, so when inflammation occurs in the body, let's pretend it's not the brain, but when inflammation occurs in the body, sometimes there's a downside, right? A bit of a price to pay. And that's your scarring, for example. In some instances, that's autoimmunity, where normal cells are also being attacked because of the war that's happening. And these sorts of scarring issues can happen in the brain because the number one evolutionary goal of your entire makeup, so i.e. your mind, your brain, your physiology, your body, is survival. It doesn't care whether or not you can do complex maths and understand physics today, right? It cares about whether or not you can breathe and eat and shit. That literally, right? Survival.
And other things, yeah.
So, in other words, you have what looks as if it's brain damage, but it's your body trying to stabilize after a hit or something traumatic happening, because the ancient brain, the reptilian brain, and well, there we go, in inverted commas, right, which is your brainstem and your cerebellum, it doesn't understand that someone punched you in the back of the head. All it knows is this part of your body, which contains your brain, your higher functions, has just been attacked. So from a evolutionary perspective, what is that? Saber-toothed tiger, conspecific. So in other words, it's someone from the Krog from the next village who wants your wife. So it's going to implement these primitive programs. If you turn out after TBI to be less cognitively adept than you were before, as a fallout, as a bystander effect of your body trying to, as best as it thinks it can, keep you breathing and eating, it'll do that. So one of the things that we do is try to slow down this inflammatory cascades that are occurring, and the easiest way is cooling the brain. Then you are stemming whatever, if there is a cut and bleed and all that, we're stemming all that. And then the active process of rehab. So back in the day, if someone got back pain and was injured at work, we used to say to them, hey, relax, just chill, just get off your feet for a few days, blah, blah. We now know that's the worst thing that we can do for these patients, because when you break collagen, when you break a bone, in this case, let's just say collagen for the time being, okay? When you break collagen, the only way the body knows how to put down collagen, and this is actually related to space stuff, the only way the brain knows how to lay down collagen is when it's given signals so that it knows what direction to lay that collagen in. And we give that collagen directionality and information of how to lay down by piezoelectric forces, i.e. mechanical forces which are transduced into electrical signaling. That's by movement. So now when someone gets back pain, back injury, if it's not like, you broke your back and you can't walk, but if it's a back strain and all that, we don't say, hey, we don't do that anymore. We tell patients to keep moving gently within tolerance and all that, but keep moving so that your body knows how to lay down that collagen. That's a little bit like rehab. Once the initial issue TBI has occurred, we then want that patient to gently, within tolerance, go back into and there's 1,001 ways to do rehab, but we want that patient to go into rehab. We want that brain to start being used in a supervised manner. So I work with a neurosurgeon at the brain clinic in Sydney, which is called Singulum Health. I am not a neurosurgeon. I am not a psychiatrist. I am the medical director for functional and longevity medicine. And what we do is, as soon as a patient is able to safely leave hospital, they need to come in. We jumpstart neuroplasticity with transcranial magnetic stimulation, and we are doing hyperbaric oxygen. We are doing photobiomodulation because we are trying to give as much energy as possible. So photobiomodulation, we're trying to give energy to the mitochondria, for example, to do its work, to detox the free radicals that are being produced with the exertion of the mitochondria. We're using hyperbaric oxygen to bring in more oxygen so that all the cells are able to do more of what it wants to do. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to assist the cells in repairing, because that's what they want to do. As far as diet goes, there is a lot to be said about making sure that patients have really, really good fats. I mean, the brain is 60% fat or more. And, you know, with all this electrical signaling, it needs to be insulated. The insulation is fat. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the right fats. And the right fats, in this case, several, but one of them is omega-3 fatty acids, because omega-3 fatty acids are the precursors to the anti-inflammatory, resolving. I mean, one of the products of omega-3 fatty acids is resolvins. I mean, the clue is in the name: resolvins, protectins, maricins. Like these are fatty acids which are going to help attenuate excess inflammation. Inflammation in and of itself is not bad, right? Inflammation or cytokines, inflammatory molecules, are signaling molecules. They tell your body where to go to repair things. If you didn't mount an inflammatory response, your body wouldn't know where to go. So we don't want to overdo it either. So it really it's a science, of course it is, but it's also an art. And I don't profess to be anywhere near an expert, but I'm very lucky to work with a team that, you know, not only there are expertise, but we try, you know, and it's not just rest. We'll see how you go in 3 months. No, you need to safely get in there when you can, and do what you can.
One of my recent favorite things that I learned about the brain was the Neuralink live stream. I don't know if you're like keeping up on what they're up to, but they found that the brain in the skull moves 3 millimeters a day. It's like a fourth of an inch. That's massive. Just like sitting there jiggling around.
Yeah, your brain actually shrinks when you are in delta wave sleep, slow wave sleep. So your brain actually shrinks just that little bit to open up the spaces in between so that cerebral spinal fluid can come through and clear things out. That's how it's able to, it's the equivalent of putting the chairs on the table at a restaurant and so that you can clean under the table. But yeah, so that's also why sleep is a very important factor, and good quality deep sleep.
Yeah. Well, in that movement, I mean, wasn't that responsible for a lot of TBI injuries in the NFL, for example? Just the constant hits.
The concussions. A guy from the concussion movie, Will Smith, a person from the region where the Will Smith's character is supposed to be from, they said that it sounds like a guy from my hometown who has a concussion. You know, like his accent was like it sounded like so bad. It's like, oh, if my cousin had a concussion, that, you know, that's what he would sound like. But which is to say, like, it wasn't a very good accent apparently. But
yeah, I only just read it. I'm like, yeah.
I forgot my question. So it moves 3 millimeters in your brain, and then other than that, I've recently learned that there's like a gut biome in the brain, like a brain biome. There's like stuff living in there.
Everywhere. Yeah. So we used to, when I was going through medical school, even not when I was going through medical school, you know, which is not that long ago.
Like last year.
we were actually told that the amniotic fluid, for example, like the sac, you know, the sac that your baby sits in is sterile, or that your bladder, the urine, is sterile. There is no place that is sterile in the body.
Yeah.
So there is a brain microbiome, basically. And, everything's talking to everything. So there is, everyone knows about the gut-brain axis, but there is a gut-skin axis, a gut-skin-lung axis, a lung-brain axis, a lung-vagina axis. I mean, there are axes everywhere. And so that's why everything is connected to everything. And the faster we really embrace that and understand that and know that everything is bidirectional. So it's not just your brain can affect your behaviors can affect your brain. So a super simple way that I demonstrate that is, okay, we know that when you're stressed, you're gonna breathe in a stressed way, right? If you use breath work or meditation, or just straight out change how you breathe, and you breathe in a way that clearly means you are not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, or your partner left the bath mat on the floor again after a shower, right? And it's soggy, it doesn't matter. Like, if you breathe in a parasympathetic way, you will actually change your emotional and psychological state, because you've brain into thinking that you're not in a sympathetic state, fight flight state. And when your brain thinks, okay, I'm not in a fight flight state, lots of other physiological things, dominoes, then fall after that, so everything affects everything. And we have 1,001, I've said that like 3 times now, 1,001 levers to pull. So it cannot just be medicine from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whereby, okay, you have depression, so we're going to give you an SSRI. There are other modalities that we can use. And we will also look at, for some patients, we can look at some modalities, or we can look at some organ systems which we think have got nothing to do with depression, but absolutely do. What's your heart health? What's your lung health? How are you sleeping? These all affect depression. Everything affects everything. Now, I'm not saying that everything affects everything equally, but we do what we can, right? And you can always move the needle in lots of layered ways towards the goal that you're after. But choice and options is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Well, the power of breathing, I heard from Jacko Willink that there's like this thing called like box breathing, where they'll take a series of breaths to like center themselves, and then they'll sniper someone in the head. And apparently makes it very accurate. And talking about depression, I wouldn't know. I'm taking his word for it. For depression, there was a study that came out that like 3 days before someone would commit suicide or something terrible like that, they basically didn't sleep. Like their sleep cycles were like really messed up, and it was almost like a predictive amount where it's like if you it's like almost everyone who's done something like that, like 3 or 4 days before then, they were like not sleeping, like all up to it. So that makes sense. What were you saying?
Yeah, we know that just one day. So this is I actually don't know who the principal investigator was for this study, but it was in the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And he talks about a study whereby one night of poor sleep, defined as 5 hours or less, results in a immune system that works 30-40% less well the next day. Which is why, because sleep can have such a profound effect on the psychoneuroimmune systems, then we need to be taking it into consideration when we're giving vaccines, for example. So we want to make sure that the patient's immune system is as where it should be if we're going to give a vaccine to induce antibody production, and sleep has to be one of the questions, or stress scales, or whatever it may be. If we had the time and the resources and the money and the whatever to treat patients as a whole, right, as in personalized medicine. But Matthew Walker also describes different statistics, like he goes twice a year, we conduct these mass experiments on the population, whereby it's where we change the box, right? Where you either give someone an hour of extra sleep or you take away an hour of sleep. And there's a blast radius of about 3 days. So when the clocks change and you take away an hour of sleep, there are more heart attacks, harsher sentences given down to convicts in jail, in the court system, and more car accidents. And the exact opposite happens 6 months later or whatever it is, whereby there are less heart attacks, there are less motor vehicle accidents, and there are less harsh sentences. So sleep has a profound effect. And that's just one pillar of health, right? We know that there are 1,001 pillars of health. In other words, you got your nutrition and your breathing and your relationships and, the whatever. So, I mean, there are lots of different levers to pull. Some of them are within the average person's reach. Not everything requires a lot of money for expensive modalities. And yeah, and I mean, not all of us are Elon Musks, who can escape to Mars or whatever it is. Anyway,
Yeah, he's a wild guy. So, but I guess the flip side to something more positive: sex and space. Is it just about the fun? Is it just about the fun for you, Alex, or is it also about like making life interplanetary? That's a great segue. I'm gonna clip that.
Oh,
But,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you talking about? Sex isn't meant to be fun.
Yeah, no.
Is it meant to be fun?
I mean, it doesn't seem like it's for cats. Cats
feel like
have
we're
like barbed
airing-
penises.
Oh my Lord. Okay, so so obviously there's always, I was actually having a conversation about this just yesterday. So there are a lot of fun aspects to the concept of sex in space. I will say that it has never failed to turn ahead, sort of when people find out what I do. Sort of it captures the attention of everybody in the room in a very immediate sort of way. In studying it actually as a science and looking at the challenges and looking at the problems that we're facing and what we have been failing to address, things that we should have started addressing 30 plus years ago, when you put the weight of responsibility for research down on it, it very quickly becomes sobering because lives will have, in the pretty near term, if we're talking years here on Earth, in the pretty near term, are going to hang in the balance. So right now, the planet, I think most people aren't aware of the immensity of change that is going to be happening in probably just the next 5 years on the planet due to a number of technologies. AI is a really good example. AI is so fundamentally going to change. It is advancing so rapidly and getting so much better. It is going to fundamentally change the way that everything works, the economy works, how we interact with each other, and the very social fabric just within the next couple of years. And that's one technology. Cheap space launch is going to be another one. So there is something called MATS, Mass Access to Space, as an acronym, that once we cross that barrier is going to fundamentally change the human species. It will, again, have all the impacts across every sector, economics and social fabric and politics, everything. Whereas the cost for flying mass into space is going to fall beneath a certain threshold, and people within industrialized societies, well-developed economies, so for example the United States or Europe, Australia, China, are going to be able to afford, as regular people, the middle classes of those societies will be able to afford access to space. It would still be a large expense, but it will be something that is attainable. So it might cost within the next 5 years, you might be able to. In fact, it's likely that you'll be able to buy a ticket into space for roughly $10,000, $15,000. It's going to depend on how commercial space launch companies, the ones that are going to usher in mass access to space, like SpaceX, for example, they're in the lead at the moment. That is going to depend on how they set pricing for launching people into space. and developing what we might call the cislunar economy or the Mirth economy. So Moon and Earth, squash them together, and you have an economy right there. If you want to learn more about that, there's a great organization, Project Moon Hut, that I would recommend you Google and go visit their website, because they explain the Mirth economy and what it will be really, really well. So looking forward in the future, we are looking at 2026 probably as when SpaceX's Starship will be certified as fully operational. And that is going to drop the cost of launching mass into space by over 40% on day one. And then the projection is that within 2 to 3 years of that happening, those costs will fall by another 90%. So to 1/10 of what they do on that day of Starship becoming operational. So at that point, you're looking at it only costing roughly $100 a kilogram to launch matter into space. For context, during the space shuttle program, that cost was roughly around, I want to say, $50,000 a kilogram, and it's ranged anywhere from $50,000 to $25,000 a kilogram, depending on the launch platform. The evolution of SpaceX has dramatically lowered that over the last couple of decades, but we have been getting closer and closer to this economic. It's really an economic inflection point that is going to dramatically change everything. It will change geopolitics, economics, and really how we view the world once we're able to start sending a lot of humans into space. The caveat to all of that is that regular humans going into space are going to do regular human activities. So people going into space are not going to be professional astronauts anymore who have trained their entire lives and dreamed their entire lives of going to space. There are going to be folks that are going for a vacation, space tourism, if you will. So they're going to be going up there for leisure purposes. They're going to be staying in space hotels or going on space cruises, around, in an orbit around the moon, things of that nature, just to enjoy the novelty of that space environment. And of course, they're going to, as I always say, humans are going to human. So of course, people are going to be having sex, but we need to make sure that people that are going into those very, very dangerous environments are doing so having given informed consent, and that includes everything surrounding reproduction. And the fact that if you have sex in space and somehow fertilization occurs and a pregnancy begins or has the potential of beginning, that there are very serious risks from the data that we do have that are going to accompany that. So the risks of ectopic pregnancy, the increased risks of endometriosis in women is something that has been floated theoretically, and the data sort of points to a greater incidence rate of that happening once we start going to space in very big numbers. This is not something that NASA or a lot of space agencies has ever seen as a threat, because they don't consider it an issue. They are, they have corps of professional astronauts, but it's not going to be professionals going to space or just professionals going to space anymore from the point that we achieve MATS at. So the point of my institution and like-minded organizations and the network that we are developing is to prevent as much damage as possible, gain as much data as we can, and be able to provide solutions going forward into the future.
Options and choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just want to be able to provide the information. And of course, we're not trying to prevent people having sex in space. That is something I will never do as a sexologist. I'm not trying to prevent people having sex, because I know they're going to do it anyway. I understand human behavior well enough to understand that much. But people still need to be informed, as they need to with really any kind of healthcare choice. So going.
So I think that like the recent question that you were asking with in Azri. So for example, some people go, okay, well, I'm on birth control, so it doesn't make a difference. Like, I'm never going to get pregnant in space. But how does birth control change? How does your physiology react to birth control in space? We don't know that answer.
Yeah,
You know?
we don't necessarily know the pharmacological efficacy of certain things in space.
How does radiation affect latex as far as condoms go? I don't think we know that answer either.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we do. I don't know. But as far as
Yeah.
condoms go,
As far as condoms go, probably not.
NASA produced condoms probably, but if you bring up Trojans, who knows, right? Are they certified for space?
That could be like a TM thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hancock, but they were trying to sell the symbol to nonprofits, right? And you can make a symbol that people can put on condoms or other materials, and it says like, "Hey, this is, Alex approved for space." And so, it could be like a little version of your face. I don't know. I like it if it was a little version of your face.
Yeah, the little heart, but it's just my face instead.
Yeah, and it's like your face, like a little thumbs up. It's like you go, you're ready to go. Or it says 3, 2, 1. I don't know. But
yeah,
somebody
like... probably get a screen capture of that and just go ahead and cut it out. So
there you go. We have consent now, but it does sound like it's more like the responsible side of things. It's not like...
I'm kidding. I copyright that.
It's not like you study like, is sex better in space from like how the brain does whatever versus like Earth. Like if someone's gonna like do tourism, like, oh, I'm gonna go to the Florida Keys, or I can go to the moon, and like one of their qualifying things is like, which is gonna provide better sex. Like that's not what you're studying. You're studying like the actual, like, making sure people are healthy and good.
So yeah, the science of the health side of things, and also psychosocial factors and stuff like that is what we study. When it comes to people making a decision, I can guarantee you the sex is going to be better on planet Earth than it's going to be in any kind of space environment. And the reason for that is because we have evolved on planet Earth. We have evolved to reproduce and engage in intercourse on this planet, all the way from single cell organisms to the complex sentient organisms that we are now. That has all occurred in one Earth gravity. So when we go into space, you're going to have the novelty of microgravity, floating around, being able to bounce around, push each other, and the Newtonian laws come into effect. But there are even the mechanics of sex in space. Things get very kind of, I guess you could say, messy. So because of how surface tension works in microgravity, liquids tend to sort of pool on this. They will pool on the surface of the skin. So it'll be you'll have globs of liquid body perspiration that are sort of hanging on to you. And
apparently you have to use gaffer tape.
This is yeah.
I mean,
that's
in space as well.
Duct tape in
duct tape.
American.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, duct tape.
So duct tape has been floated as an option to sort of harness one partner to the floor, so that you have something
or
to
the wall
to hold on to.
I'm not fussy.
Yeah, you can make like in is it like Attack on Titans? They have those little like jet things on their backs. You can make something like that for sex for both parties, and then like it could be like either someone's controlling it or like everyone's brain's like controlling through BCI.
I don't know how many entrepreneurs watch your show, but I mean they're probably just going off right now.
The cheaper option would probably just be like Velcro, right?
Yeah. Velcro has been floating.
Velcro's less fun than Velcro's less fun than zooming around in like a Attack on Titan type suit while having sex.
No, I know that you're trying to possibly try and use this to segue into like a Neuralink type thing.
No, I'm not.
I'm not rubber stamping that, dude.
No, I was more thinking like, how do I ask Olivia her thoughts on his opinions given they're dating? It's like there's a lot of things that without it being weird. So, Dr. Olivia, what do you think about the thoughts on sex being better on planet Earth?
We need more wine.
From the science.
So what it is look, I'm to be serious, right? Like this, the questions that Alex is asking or his organization are asking with regards to reproductive factors, conception, sex, and space, they're not being asked at the moment in a way that it should be asked, i.e. with fervor, getting that data. Because let's put it this way, right? You have and this is my opinion, not Alex's, right? So he's out of frame now. This is not what he's saying. I'm saying this.
Yeah.
And it's this: you have so much money being pumped into this, the engineering, the software,
All right, I'm back in frame.
all this to abandon this planet to try and get to Mars or wherever, because we can't be asked to put the funding into trying to fix this place. And if you ask questions about, hey, when we get to Mars, are we actually able to live, to reproduce, to have healthy children? Those questions are inconvenient, because right now,
Go ahead.
right now, from what I understand, the data says probably not. But if that data is definitively defined and said to be okay, yeah, it's true. We're probably not going to be able to healthily reproduce in space. What happens to the funding of these companies that are spending billions of dollars in rockets? Like,
Well, it reminds me of Phidias Gage, where for the longest time with the brain, we only knew like how certain parts worked based on when something got messed up. So for people who do not know, Phidias Gage is this really nice man who got a railroad spike through his head and became a very not nice man. And
yes.
And so like
The
that's kind of
railway,
how we yeah.
the railroad worker.
Yes. And so that was kind of how it was for the longest time. So if we're
The spike went through his head.
oh yeah, there's like
Wow.
pictures of CT scans. Yeah.
I'm learning all kinds of cool things today.
Yes.
These are my favorite podcasts, are the ones that I learn things on.
Anyway, sorry, go on, Lowell.
Yes,
So,
that's all good. I appreciate the compliment. So the to what Alex is doing, I wonder to what extent, like, if you're learning like these processes that are making ectopic pregnancies or increasing the likelihood of endometriosis and these other things, what if in learning these things in space, we're able to see a different side of the picture and reverse engineer how these things are happening and help people in a different way?
on Earth, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I know. So I cut the part earlier where you were talking about fixing, obviously fixing issues on Earth and everything. There's I don't necessarily want to misinterpret what you were saying, but there has been language thrown around in the past where people raise the question of, well, why are we going to space? Why are we spending so much money going to space when there's so many problems here on Earth? And that is an absolutely fair point to raise. What I would tack on to that, however, is that when we go into space, we recontextualize everything. So there is something. Somebody who I was very fortunate to meet, a man by the name of Frank White, authored a book called The Overview Effect, which talks about a psychological phenomenon that occurs in astronauts when they get high into space and they look back at the Earth for the first time. There is a profound effect that falls over them where they realize I mean, man, I don't mean to get emotional when I think about it myself, but when they realize the pointlessness of all the arguments and petty divisions and battles and racism that we see here on Earth, because when you look back at the Earth, you don't see how we look at a map. You don't see the borders and lines and divisions of what countries are cut up into what and who lives where. You just see this mass of blue and green and brown and white for the clouds that in the words of I'll paraphrase William Shatner here. I actually got to see him speak a couple of years ago at South by Southwest. So he went up in a Blue Origin rocket, and he said that he couldn't describe the feeling he had when he came back down and landed. It was a feeling of, he said at first, melancholy that he was trying to process and he couldn't figure out. And he realized that it was because when he went into space, all he saw was blackness and death, emptiness. There was nothing. But then when he turned back and looked at Earth, he saw the blue and the green and the brown and the white and these smears of color, and he saw life. Life was back there on Earth. And we have to understand and recognize just how unique we are in the universe. I have my personal convictions that we are certainly not the only planet that harbors life in this universe. In fact, there's probably millions of them when you just look at the math. But we are still exceptionally unique as a planet. And I won't go off into the numbers of how unique we are, and why we have not interacted with with other potential intelligent civilizations in the universe and things like that. So I won't go off into that, but I do want to highlight the fact that when we go into space, we see how unique and special the Earth is, and a feeling washes over people. And this is what this is one of the things I think mass access to space will have a amazing effect, or why it will have an amazing effect is we realize how unimportant our quarrels are, and what unifies us is more important. And that we need to take care of this planet. We need to fix the things that are wrong. We need to stop deforestation.
Deforestation. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm stuttering. So yeah, we need to stop destroying the home that we live on. And going into space, a lot of the technological advancements that we have made over the past, especially the last 60 years, when you think about the effects that GPS, for example, has had on just life on Earth, in terms of how efficient it has made travel, because people aren't running their engine and stopping and pulling out a new map and looking for directions. People just go from point to point. They're able to do that because of GPS. Aircraft all around the planet, same thing. So transportation has reached optimum efficiency because of GPS. GPS was a U.S. military satellite constellation, which is now able to be used for the benefit of the entire planet. So if we are able to bring in satellite communications, telecom, cell phones, all these things that have dramatically improved your average individual's life on Earth, in terms of how much information they can access, how quickly they can figure things out. I'm not saying that we're all, as individuals, using it to the best of our ability, but the very fact that it has advanced our society so much, all of that was because of what we have discovered in space. We effectively went into space, and these are somebody else's words, not mine. We effectively went into space, and what we discovered was Earth, was ourselves. So I think absolutely the investment in going into space, exploring space, is absolutely worth it. I mean, it pays out.
I don't think any of us are saying otherwise.
No. I know you're not. I just wanted to expand on the comments, because I know that when we say, why don't we fix stuff here on Earth, a lot of people do latch on to that. But there's more to the argument that I just wanted to add context for.
But it's like everything else, right? It's not a pie that gets cut up in the definitive pieces. It's not like that. So it's not as if we shouldn't be talking about longevity if we still have the rampages of HIV/AIDS or whatever. That it's not like this is the finite amount of dollars, and we either spend it on this or nothing else, and we should all just decide on the most important things that we need to spend it on. I don't think that that's an argument. Like, I think that your argument about the fact that we are going to learn more about ourselves, about engineering, about science, and then we can, as you said, Lowell, like we can reverse engineer it back to problems on Earth. Those are all very, very valid points. 100%.
Yeah.
There.
Okay.
Well,
Like-
honestly, I think people make comments like that. It's kind of obnoxious because it's like if you, Alex, you're very passionate about this field. If I plucked you out of your job and made you an engineer in Middle America on a wheat farm, are you going to be satisfied with life? I think the engineer in Middle America working on a wheat farm is very happy with their life, and this is something that you're excited about, and you should just go full throttle. And that's how we get the best out of everyone. If everyone can just kind of go full throttle on their things. Like these people are like, why don't you worry about Earth? It's like, well, okay, what are you doing about Earth? The Earth is more green.
Exactly. Right.
The Earth is more
It's sort
green.
of-
There's sorry, go ahead, Olivia.
No, it's you see these sorts of arguments on social media all the time, right?
Yeah.
Where you have
I ignore
someone
'em.
talk, yeah, exactly. You know, you see these things about men's mental health, let's just say, and there's always some. I don't know if can I swear? I'm not sure.
You can do whatever.
There's some
Just don't-
dickhead that there was some dickhead that says, oh, you know, women suffer abuse more than men suffer abuse in a domestic relationship. This isn't a pie, man. Like, you know, this person has chosen to write about men suffering abuse in a domestic relationship. Don't you say a word. And then, you know,
it's terrible.
right?
We're not meaning to make light of domestic abuse.
No, yeah,
But
no, it's good.
this social media thing where people believe that what they think to be the most important issue, and therefore everyone thinks that it should be the most important issue, is a real problem, you know. And
Yeah.
keyboard warriors are bane of every person who posts on social media's existence, I think.
Well, it's all virtue signaling. I think for a lot of them, I think if anyone who is doing something meaningful that wants to critique what I'm doing, I will have that conversation with you. But if you're not doing anything with your life and you would like to critique me, and I've gained nothing from the critique other than the fact that now I've learned that someone in Wyoming doesn't like what I'm doing. I don't need it. You know,
Wyoming's a
so
beautiful state.
I've never been
So-
there. I'm never gonna go there. I drove through Iowa. That was enough
Wow,
for
I
me.
think we've touched on something,
I
Lowell.
mean, it's cold in the winter, so
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are from, I don't know. Not to be mean to Wyomingians.
well, no, I'm not from there.
I generally think that the Mississippi to the Rockies, like that part of America, you could skip it, and I think you're gonna be okay.
Okay, let's edit this out of the podcast.
Right. Right. It's only pissed off like 40 million people.
How many-
Actually, it's not even that many people, but they would probably be pretty fervent. I think it is South Dakota or North Dakota or Wyoming, those forgettable states that were just mentioned, that they are pioneering new nuclear engineering, like the Bill Gates nuclear stuff that they're doing. They're putting all those plants over there, so they are doing
Well,
something. Yeah,
Nobody lives there, so
yeah, eminent domains pretty easily.
the nuke fields in the United States are in the Dakotas and in Wyoming and Montana. So, although one thing I will say for Montana is one of the most beautiful states you'll ever visit.
That I'll never visit. So anyway, no, just
I like
kidding.
that.
No, I'll
That's
visit.
cool.
I'll visit.
Montana's awesome.
No, I'm just being a butt there. No, so some positive things that the world's actually getting more green. I was just reading about this morning, and I'm sure there's nice places in. I believe what you're saying. I just don't like Arizona, and I kind of group them all in. But the Earth, because of all the CO2 and stuff, it's getting more green. You talk about like all these.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
the downsides with climate change. There's some good stuff too. There's
Yeah,
more leafy greens.
Jungle's taking back over the cities.
Okay, I mean, look, I am in no way an expert. I'm not gonna. I just, we do have to ask questions like what kind of green, right? There's a difference between some plants and other types of forests and all that kind of thing. So, I'm.
Can't do all those.
I had, and we're probably all talking about stuff that we're not experts in, but so had read
So
about
nuclear physics. huh?
about algae increasing in the oceans, which is not necessarily a good thing because you have these big blooms that come and they
Kill stuff.
wreck the beaches and stuff like that. But those are becoming more frequent because oceans are getting warmer.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to sort of. I don't listen. I don't watch mainstream news. I haven't done for about 2-3 years now because it's just I don't know what I can trust anymore. I don't know what's propaganda, what isn't. I mean, I'm from Australia, which means that that I'm where Rupert Murdoch was born from. You know, we're responsible for essentially succession, right? I mean, and and as well with medicine. I've been struggling the last few years with trying to bridge that gap between true science, which is the science that I was educated on, which is the fact that it's never settled and that we should be debating things and allowed to ask questions, and that some questions get given more time for sure, but if there's plausibility or you know, we're true to the Hippocratic oath to first do no harm, then questions are welcome, right? Because we want the best for our patients. And I've kind of struggled the last few years in Australia. I can't speak to any other country, but certainly Australia, where the mandates were very harsh. People were treated quite harshly. Not everybody, but there were some people who were life was difficult for them. And I'm not yet sure how I feel about all that as a doctor, because science should be about us being able to ask questions.
Well, I think related to like the fact from fiction, I think there was something. I wish sometimes I would cite where I read this, because then it would be easier for you to remember it too. Like, oh, that's what he's talking about. But there's something called quantum medicine,
Yes.
and I was like, what is this, and how do you use it?
One of her favorite
Okay,
So
good. Yes.
I'm again nowhere near an expert, but I am very interested, and that is, I mean, the basic a basic fundamental phenomena of how life on Earth works is because mitochondria works. How does mitochondria work? Mitochondria is a bacteria that was engulfed by a cell many millions of years ago, and it produces the energy for that cell. We have millions of mitochondria in some of our cells. So brain cells, for example, have millions of mitochondria per cell. Otherwise, it's tens or hundreds of thousands of mitochondria per cell, depending on how much energy that organ needs. So how does mitochondria work? Well, you have a outer membrane and an inner membrane. And in that inner membrane, you have protein complexes. And the protein complexes, 4 of them, plus little adjuncts, they're called the electron transport chain, which gives you a clue as to what happens. And at the end of the electron transport chain, where you are converting parts from the citric acid cycle, you know, from one component to another to remove hydrogen, which is then pumped into that intermembrane space, you then make ATP, which is those packets of energy. So that's why we always call the mitochondria the powerhouses of the cell, which is like a tiny, a fraction, a portion of what these mitochondria do. Importantly, the electron transport chain is exactly that. It moves quantumly. It quantum tunnels electrons from one side of the protein complex to the other. In that tunneling, you are removing hydrogen. And how that the type of hydrogen that you're removing, right? Whether it, because there are three isotopes of hydrogen, the type of hydrogen you're removing is going to determine how well that ATPase, that hydrogen pump, is going to move to produce energy. So apart from electron tunneling, which of course is very important, and a quantum phenomena, you're actually looking at the fact that those protein complexes are light receptors, because we evolved with light. Specifically, cytochrome C, which is between protein complexes 3 and 4, I think, is an infrared receptor. But all of the protein complexes are light receptors: red light, infrared, some spectrum between, I want to say, 400 to 800 and something nanometers or so. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert, but that's why getting sunlight is important. We evolved with the sun. That's why infrared saunas can be very helpful for some patients. That's why red light therapy, photobiomodulation can be so important. All these different wavelengths of light are going to stimulate the electron transport chain in our mitochondria to produce energy. And not only does it produce energy, but it also produces water, a type of water that's called structured water. So anyway, that is the basis of quantum biology or quantum medicine, understanding that not everything happens that in a way that classical physics can explain. I would consider myself a complete newbie to the field, but I am enthralled. And there are far better people to talk to who I am very proud to say are now colleagues or friends because of Instagram. But, you know, in trying to learn about something that I am proudly can say I know nothing about, that means that you have a beginner's mindset, which means that you're a sponge and you're going to pick up everything that you can if you're learning from people who are learned and who are advanced in these sorts of fields. So my next, we have a research institute called Legacy Sciences. And one of the things that we do is to explore these sorts of questions, re-ask things in the world of medicine and health, you know, because every research question that is being asked about any disease process at the moment is being asked based off answers from previous questions, which were asked based off answers from previous questions. So sometimes you actually have to pull it right back and re-ask some very basic questions. Because if you went down the wrong fork in the road early on in the piece, then you are forever going to be chasing your tail or asking the wrong questions because of the answers to the wrong questions, you know? So the mechanisms of light, vibration, electromagnetism on cells and on health are some of the questions that we're asking. So stay tuned.
So it's like nascent. There isn't like I don't know, like if I had like a staph infection, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna give you, you know, whatever would be the equivalent of like an antibiotic or whatever. I don't know how to treat a staph infection for the record. It's like I don't know if antibiotics are actually appropriate. Like they're not at that stage where there's like ways to use
Oh,
it.
there is. Yeah.
Okay.
There are absolutely protocols now of light, of
Okay.
electromagnetism for sure. I mean, some of the, you know, the problem with this field is that because it's such complex science, it seems as if there are only two people that are really playing in the field, right? Overtly. People who are doing such complex science and they're not medical, because I'm not going to lie to you, doctors, we're not theoretical physicists, right? We are beyond that translatability gap where all the hard science happens in the research institutes and in the universities, and then we're patient facing, and you know, we kind of work off algorithms, and anyway, medicine's gone to shit to some extent. But anyway, so the now that we're looking at these sorts of sciences again, because we have the assays to be able to interrogate them appropriately, like I said, light, vibration, electromagnetism, this is now the domain of hardcore theoretical physics or chemistry, the sciences that are still locked in universities or research institutes, right? Then the other group of people who are involved in light and vibration and electromagnetism tends to be what's known colloquially amongst doctors and scientists as the hippies, right? So it's a very hard science to sort of get into as a translational person, because you don't want to get shut down as well, because you don't want to be seen to be, you know, unscientific. But the science is so difficult that you really do. It's going to take, I think, at least another 5, maybe 10 years for people like, you know, like us who are more on this side of the translatability gap to understand it enough to translate it in a way that it still holds on to those scientific roots, those medical roots. But
Go ahead. But
but there are definitely companies out there that are using light and electromagnetism for disease therapies. So the one that I was actually told Alex about for the first time yesterday is a company called Emulate. And Emulate has a product called Voyager. I've been following them for a few years, since 2019, actually, when I first saw them present at a Northwell Hospital brain tumor summit in New York. And essentially, they take the electromagnetic frequency of glioblastoma drugs, and a patient wears a band around their head that pumps out the electromagnetic frequency of the drug that can't pass the blood-brain barrier to treat glioblastoma, brain tumors. That's, you're using electromagnetism. You don't actually have to take a pill. Like, these sorts of advancements has only sort of happened in the last few years, but we've been talking about this. People have been talking about this for decades, but we are only now having the technology to be able to really sort of do it for the population.
Yeah, I googled it at the same time. Like, it is very minimal. I would think, based on what you were saying, that I was going to look at like something like an MRI size thing. Like, this is like a headband. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
all right, so
We did the feasibility studies in Australia, actually.
Well, they do have the prisoners. That's how you guys were. I think you guys were founded by prison convicts, right? Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very happy place. I was talking to an English person earlier today, and I don't know what it is, but I'll bring up the Revolutionary War to any British person I meet. It's like, yeah, you guys lost. I don't know.
God,
I just
you and
do it,
Alex.
but
So Alex is a history buff, and he loves like all the different wars and stuff.
what's your
One of my
favorite war?
Oh God.
Oh, my favorite.
What's your favorite war?
I don't know if you'd say a favorite war. Like American or just
I mean,
overall?
if you're a nerd for wars, it's just like, what is there war? I mean, you can phrase it in a better way than me. I was just making a joke, but like what is a war that you like get really excited about?
Wow. Okay, so one that I find historically interesting, we'll phrase it that
There
way.
you go. Thank you.
So I mean, I think a lot of folks in the States, find a lot of historical interest in the Civil War, in the American Civil War specifically. What are other ones? The Mexican War, I had taken some interest in. The Spanish-American War, Revolutionary War, obviously, and then
Obviously.
so
What is a
happy
very good underdog story?
season day, Yankees. And then every 4th of July, that's what I get for my British friends. And then I mean, in terms of wars around the world, I'd recently started getting into the Peloponnesian War. I don't know, or I haven't read enough on it right now to talk to it well, but it makes for some very interesting reading.
Yeah.
So.
Have you read John Keegan's The Peloponnesian War?
I have not yet, so it's on my book list.
I read that one, and I read the Thucydides, or however you say his name, and I like John Keegan's. It's a little bit more accessible. So if you want something that won't be a little,
John Keegan
less
tends, but
yeah, it's a little better. But all right. So for legacy sciences, or just in general for each of you, what is something that listeners can do to help you guys out? Is there like an ask? Is there something you can be working on? Like anything like that?
Yeah, I'll give you our bank details and what.
You can. We can do a fundraiser.
just we'll put our email here in the chat.
Look, at the end of the day, okay, so professionally, both of us are doing very different things, and we're hunky-dory with what we're doing. Alex, well, you can speak about Azri and what you're doing there. As far as legacy sciences go, it really is of interest to anybody who is interested in asking questions which would be considered questions that wouldn't be asked in conventional medicine. And it's literally asking questions for asking questions' sake. So it's
still sticking to the scientific method, though.
Oh yeah, of course,
Yeah.
right? But it's like the equivalent of back in the Roman times, where you kind of sit around and you just you shoot the shit, right? You shoot the breeze, because asking questions and trying to learning new ways of thinking is as important, if not more important, than the answers that you get. Because one of the biggest issues that we have I think, in our modern scientific thinking or medical thinking is that we now, the way we're trained is to be algorithmically driven. This symptom equals this drug, this reaction to that drug equals this other drug, or increased dose or decreased dose. Like, thinking has actually come out of the equation at some point. So to go back into rethinking about the problems that we have and readdressing them in different ways, I think that's super valuable. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's a labor of love more than anything. But if anybody's interested in that kind of stuff, by all means, reach out. Otherwise, I'm pretty sweet. I've got my fingers in lots of different pies, and I kind of like that. But Alex has got more interesting, pressing things with his 501c. So is that what you call it? 501c?
Oh, it's a 501c3, don't I?
Oh,
So that's an American thing. So yeah, I mean, so Azri is a 501c3. You can, if you want to learn more about us or what we do, we are at asri.space, so not .com, .space.
oh, tell them about the symposium.
Oh yeah, so coming in, well, yeah, I'm telling the public about this now.
Oh.
So coming at the end of October, we are going to be holding the inaugural, we are co-sponsoring an inaugural scientific symposium on sex and reproduction, specifically human sex and reproduction in outer space environments. That is going to be happening in Houston, Texas on 30 and 31 October. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to space-reproduction.com, or excuse me, .org. And if you have any interest in donating to those proceedings, we do have a donate button there. And then also learning more about Azri, you can go to our website. But effectively, what we are looking to do out of that symposium is create a sort of consensus roadmap based on the roadmap that Azri has been developing over the last couple of years. And that is going to give us the blueprint for humanity that is going to allow us to reproduce in space and flourish in space, because we're not just studying reproduction, but also general sexual health, sexual response, psychosocial issues, and how we develop psychologically as a species.
Health span.
Yeah, health span. So going into space. So on new locales, if you will, for humanity. So on the moon, on Mars, on other moons and celestial bodies throughout the solar system.
Bodies.
Nice. We do seek to enable humanity to eventually expand out into the rest of the cosmos. And our mission and what we're doing is largely focused around that. We want to get all humanity's eggs out of just one basket. Oh my God, I never realized the pun there. So yeah, it's the wine, I swear to God. But,
yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on the show today. Answering questions
I feel like,
from the fans.
I was told this was a drinking show. I feel like I was the only one who's doing consistently drinking. So
Lowell said that it was meant to be an informal chat.
Oh.
Anyway, so
I wrote that down. I actually Let's in my for everyone listening. This is shop talk a little bit, but in my thing it says it's just relax. That's for the nervous people. But I'm happy to
I wasn't nervous. I mean, I enjoy the drinking part.
You can drink.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it was so nice
Yes.
to have this chat with you, Lowell.
Yes, but yeah, for the record, everyone's welcome to drink anytime. I actually think you ever do hot ones where they do the wings. I think it'd be fun if it was cold ones where we just go around, because people like alcohol, and so I would like it for we were to go to your place, we'd have this in person. You guys pick the wine, and then we talk about it. Or
Yes.
It's like cold ones but with alcohol, but that you'd pick and then I'd pay for, which is kind of nice setup, I think.
You know what? Honestly, when we go back to the UK, to the US, it would be really nice to catch up with you. Actually, I think it'd be nice to meet you and your partner too. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm in Wyoming, but anyway, so thanks for coming on the show. I'm not.
Oh, you are. You're not Wyoming. So I feel like you're not. I feel like that's the last state you would be in. But